Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, one and all. Welcome to another edition of the Smoking Barrel. I'm Rustin Edwards in Switzerland with my illustrious, exhausted counterpart, Mr. Matt Stanley in Dubai.
Greetings. Yeah, I just had a rust before we came on. Pretty hungover today, in a good way because I got drunk with my wife, and that was nice. We're not celebrating anything, but she's back. Kids are back. They're at school today. Um, and yeah, we went out, and it's just it's a bizarre kind of environment. I put on my commentary this morning. It's like things are back to normal when it comes to structure, right? So daily routine, get up, feed the kids, or drag them out of bed first, um, drive to school. And we're lucky it's only sort of 5, 10 minutes down the road, and they all go within sort of a square, well, let's say half a square mile of each other, so same school and nursery for Charlie. And it was quieter. I'm not going to lie. I reckon traffic was half of what it usually is. Whether that's we were a bit early, whether that's because a lot of people are still away, whether that's because some people are carpooling, probably a combination of all three. But I realized that, okay, this is normal routine for us as a family, but nothing's normal because the freaking strait is still closed and it's there's a very fragile ceasefire agreement. Um, but I get it. And I said this as well this morning when I was writing. Kids go to school, which means parents go to work, which means people order stuff, which means people are consuming stuff, and the economy starts to try and recover. But nothing can truly look at being on the path to recovery until the Strait of Hormuz is open, and it's not. And we're in a fragile ceasefire, which is seemingly now moved from missiles to shipping diplomacy in the Straits, but nothing is back to normal. It's very much just part. I don't know. I just feel like we're waiting for something again. So morning.
Well,
Um,
that's kind of the
that's where we
way I
are.
think the world is at the moment. And we got crude oil grinding higher, $108 a barrel
Yeah,
for a June contract. Gas oil up another $29 a ton, back to 1,278 a ton, which is what approximately 175 a barrel,
yeah,
give or take. So, I mean, the markets are reacting, slowly but surely moving higher.
yeah,
Uh, because, as you said, with the Hormuz still closed, that's still 20% of the world's energy not getting out to the market. And you couple that with the seizure of Iranian tankers by the United States government,
yeah,
that tightens the market up again by another 101.5 million barrels a day.
yeah. Exactly. And look, I want to let's just have a look at where flat price is. What Russ was saying. Um, there's something I want to sort of talk about, and what obviously is only one thing to talk about. One thing I want to concentrate on the discussion, which is the US blockade and how effective it is, because I think that lots of people. Let's get onto that in a minute. But yeah, you're right. Flat price 108. Yeah, we were at 108.11 a minute ago. Where are we now? 5 minutes until the Singapore window. 107.84. This spread, I'm worried about this spread coming into expiry. You can see still trading quite a bit. The June Brent contracts, the front one, and then we got July, which will come into front of the screen on Friday. 634 June July. Where does that go? Do we see that squeeze again? I think we do.
Well,
Why wouldn't we?
you'll get people who are going to roll June to July, so that's going to put downward pressure bias on June and upward bias on July. So yeah, we could see that spread squeeze in.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm worried about it. I mean, look, it's still pretty. I know it's further down the curve. Here is Octnov is trading at 212. I haven't got where Novi Deck is. But yeah, I was talking to a few people last week about, and I just think people position themselves for, I reckon 70% of the market thought the Strait would be open already, didn't you?
I think there was probably a lot of people who were gambling for that. Yeah. Because eventually cooler heads have to prevail and eventually something's got to happen because at some point, my guess is either A, Iran will blink and have to come to some type of negotiation settlement with the US government.
Yeah.
I don't think the US government is going to blink at all because The strait doesn't necessarily impact the U.S. as much as it does the U.S. military.
Yeah.
Um, but nevertheless, it is from a commercial tradable standpoint, it is not a it's not an issue for the U.S. It's an issue for the U.S.'s partners in the GCC.
Yeah.
And that's where you can probably see some pressure. Of course, the Asian market is probably feeling the brunt of the energy crisis because, when you think of the economic viability of some of these countries, in Asia, in the Malay Peninsula, I mean, having oil, and gasoline prices roof, and they don't have the economy or the income to support those increases.
Yeah, you're right. I mean, we were talking about this. I messaged you early on Saturday. I was reading an article in the FT. I might have it here actually. And it was Wall Street shrugs off energy stock. I'll try and find it. I'll try and find it. Yes, I do still read a paper. Um, but it's definitely, I would say, the news value of the conflict is diminishing. And when we're seeing things like Iran to resume flights from bombed airports, a lot of it, I wouldn't say has been priced in, but it's just not commanding the same headlines. America's new energy dominance. This is the article. Read it. It's really good. But they use a lot of Kepler data as well. Um, and it says, that this is the Cheniere CEO, Jack Fusco, who says, we are trying to do whatever we can do. We are trying to get as many molecules as we can to those countries in Asia that really need it. And there's some cynical bastards out there who think there may be an agenda behind all this conflict for US energy dominance. Was that a driving factor behind the war? I don't think so. I don't think even I can be that cynical. But you know, Chevron, Valero, Marathon, name them. No, I mean, take your pick out of any US oil company, any US refiner, they're doing very well. I mean, you look at Australia buying US diesel for the first time and taking it through the Panama Canal. And we've seen quite a few of those cargoes. They're MR cargoes as well. People will buy for whoever has the supply. But it's yeah, look, we'll get onto that in a minute, but let's just stay in the prism of what it means between, you're right about Iran, who's in more of a rush. It has been portrayed that this is well, I'm not budging first kind of scenario where we are. This is what Homayoun wrote over the weekend or Friday it was. This is what I wanted to clarify on the blockade. So if we're referring to the blockade, let me go into the map so you can see. If at any stage this starts getting slow, let me know. So the blockade is in place, and it was clear on there was a backdrop the other day when CENTCOM were on a press. I think there's a press briefing that this is where the blockade is. It's from here. So Oman, this is so is that Sohar? That's been
It's actually from the tip of Ras Al Had, which is the
this one.
peninsula there,
Yeah,
all the way up to the
across
border.
the here. Yeah. So it's obviously like dot 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 dot, dot lots of US Navy. So this is what we want to clarify because there's some bullshit arguments going around saying, that there's a lot of oil slipping through the net. This is what Commune goes on to say. There hasn't been one confirmed tanker that has exited the US blockade, right? That blockade is holding, and it is, and I mean, if we're going to refer to things slipping through the net and the U.S. Navy not picking up on it and going, oh shit, not at all. There hasn't been one tanker, Iranian tanker, that has left the blockade that has passed through that area. So what has to happen? If oil can't get out, it has to either go on a ship or it has to go into storage. There's only a finite amount of ships that are in the Middle East Gulf. And there is only so much oil that's in storage in Carg Island, which is the big sort of oil export terminal. So this is what Homayoun says: usable storage stands at 26 million barrels, which is roughly 14 days, rising to 22 days, including floating storage. So anything that can be put on the NITC, the National Iranian Tanker Company's fleet. Production cuts are underway, with cuts seen to rise as much as 1.5 million barrels a day by the middle of May, which is in 3 weeks' time. Loadings have dropped to 567,000 barrels a day from 1.85 last month. That is, and this is what it means in terms of dollars, 200 to 250 million dollars a day. I mean, this is the export, this is the main terminal. So this you can see Carg Island here, which is the dark blue column. Um, it makes up the what's that, 95% of Iran's oil exports, like where they're loading from.
Hmm.
Um, and you just think, okay, how much longer can this go on? We can see Iranian oil inventories at record highs. Um, this is what happens to Iran's oil production. So this is what we've got in May. I'm assuming what Homoyun is doing here, we estimate crude production will fall from 2.7 million barrels a day to 1.2 to 1.3 by mid-May if the blockade holds. If the blockade is lifted by late May, production should recover quickly given NIOC's strong experience in managing wellhead production flows. But if the blockade doesn't continues, forget this, what one would call optimistic, this continues on this trend, right?
It'll continue down to the point where you meet the internal refining capacity of Iran. Because Iran does have its own refining base, so it does need feed for those refining. So, when you
Yes.
say they produce 2.7 million barrels, exporting 1.8 million, well, that tells you they've got 900,000 barrels of refining capacity that has to be fed. So that gives you your baseline as to how far they can go.
Yeah, I mean, look, and that's domestic supply or supply within
That may
Iran.
be domestic supply and probably regional supply to, Afghanistan, maybe to Pakistan, maybe up to some of the other places that border the country on the interior.
Yeah, because I saw someone sent me this video the other day that the fuel is being smuggled over into the Pakistan border from Iran using mopeds. And I did the maths on this, right? So there was this video of all these guys on mopeds going across the sand and they were getting stuck and stuff. And I reckon they had 24-gallon drums on um on the back of their mopeds, right? So I reckon here's the maths on that, right? And have a look at it. Mopeds, Iran, heavy fuel smuggling, whatever it is. Um, so here's the maths on that. And this is where my mate said to me because they were trying to put a bit of banter on a football chat that I'm on. And they went, Stan, mate, you need to get out because every bloody joke at the moment is even you talking about bloody oil. So here's the maths. I said, that's amazing. So I reckon that's probably high sulfur gas oil that they're holding, 24 gallons each drum. There's 42 gallons in a barrel and roughly 7.4 barrels in a metric ton, right? One MR is 37,000 metric tons. That's about 275,000 barrels, and that's around 482,000 stupid freaking mopeds for one cargo. So that's where we are. I mean, look, we've seen Iraq start to move oil by truck that's loading out of Syria. We've seen Iraq move naphtha out of Akbar in Jordan, but that's not sustainable. That makes it so expensive.
Well, that's the thing is that they have to get these products out in a lot of these areas that can't normally ship out via the water
Yeah,
because they need to supply the other consumer fuels for their population. And so when you start getting to that point where naphtha becomes bottlenecked because, okay, naphtha, you blend that into gasoline or you sell it out into the market as a feedstock because you're using all the other parts of the barrel to make diesel, make jet fuel, make mogas, and naphtha's left over.
yeah,
Well, you're not going to stop your refining. Up, can't move the naphtha, so we're shutting down, and then you starve your entire country. You're going to try to find ways to alleviate the bottlenecks
yeah.
and move barrels out the least efficient way possible. So yeah, it becomes a trucking game uh, more than a barging game.
Yeah, because look, I mean, a lot of the refineries inland in Iraq, which are plenty. I think there's around 20 refineries. They move all the fuel oil by truck, and it
Yeah.
goes out of Basra, and then it goes to Khor Al Zubair, and there's a floater. So it's an inefficient system anyway. But what you're going to do is you're going to end up taking away because that route through to Banias to Syria, which goes north and then west, if you're looking at Iraq, that takes a lot of truck infrastructure away for say another 2 weeks, right? So it's 50-ton trucks. It's a lot. But yeah, look, I mean, what's your thoughts on that then? I mean, Iran, eventually this blockade is the, ultimately that is the objective with the blockade is to frustrate the Iranian system so no oil can come out, so they have to make a deal. That's what the objective is, right?
Yeah, it's an economic squeeze. You're trying to put a squeeze on the economics of the regime to force them to come to the table and finalize a deal of some type. And with that, so not only do we have the blockade of Iranian ports, but you also have the seizure of Iranian tankers outside on the open ocean.
Yeah.
That it's been conducted by the U.S. Navy with the U.S. Coast Guard in some cases, depending on the case of the ship. And so you're actually trying to choke the lifeline fully of Iran, not only from the load port, but also ships that have left and are currently in the open oceans.
So how much longer can the narrative coming out of Iran be aggressive? We're like, well, we're not moving because eventually, with $250 million a day of revenue lost at current prices, I mean, the country simply cannot function.
No, I mean it's. I heard a comment earlier today, which I don't know if it's true or not, but it was an amazing number. 1 billion of lost revenues so far from Iran with the blockade currently in force.
A
One
billion.
billion US dollars.
Yeah, but I mean, at $250 million a day, that's 4 days, right?
Yeah, which would make sense if that's the true number. And if you've got and are there holes in the blockade? Yeah, there are certain holes and there's certain routes that some ships are taking to evade the US Navy. Because the US Navy, operating under the rules of operation, cannot go into the sovereign territory of a third party nation. And so what you do see some ships trying to skirt along the Pakistani Indian coast in
Right,
order to get out to the market. And so they stay inside the exclusive economic zone, 12 miles offshore of these countries. The Navy can't touch them. So as soon as those ships get into international waters, they become fair game. And that's where you see the seizure of some of these tankers that have happened in the open ocean over the last couple of days. Um,
right. So when you're talking about the a third, so the country's into what's it? What is there? It's 12 miles, isn't it? You go out 12 miles and then you're
it,
into, or does it vary?
it varies based on what countries claim and what other people have agreed to. 12 miles is kind of a standard number. Where
Okay,
you're in the territorial waters of another country. Um,
right,
but like you take like the United States, they say the exclusive economic zone of the United States is 200 miles off coast. Um,
right. Okay, and then who polices that? Like, who says no, it's not? I mean, no one,
yeah,
right?
well, the U.S. can do that because they have a navy and they've got a coast guard and they can go out and they can patrol those areas.
Right,
It's kind of like with when you look at it like the ECA zones for maritime transit. ECA zones extend out from a certain distance from the countries that are enforcing some type of sulfur emission limit.
right,
And those usually go out to their EEZs. So, for instance, the United States, the ECA zone starts 200 miles from coast. In
okay,
Europe, depending on what country, it goes out how far it needs to. I mean, when you think of like the Mediterranean's a full ECA, well, I mean, that's, how wide is the Mediterranean at its widest point
right.
versus the open ocean?
Okay, okay. So basically, if all those Iranian boats were to hug the coastline, well, no, because hang on, sorry. So where you've got the blockade, where I just put that on the map, and Chalabar or Chabahar, wherever it is, that port in the south, which is right on the. So are you saying that the U.S. Navy cannot go into Iranian waters?
Well, no, the U.S. Navy can go into Iranian waters if they wanted to. But, you're now putting yourself into a more kinetic action. So if they want to go to the Chhatar, which is the port that's right next to the Pakistani border, and seize
Yeah,
all those ships, A, you would tie up a lot of ships to do that and a lot of personnel to do that.
right,
So it's much better to keep them bottlenecked in their own port of call, knowing that they cannot leave.
right. Because essentially, once the vessels that are sort of round into the Gulf of Oman, for example, and then left, nothing else can come through, can come back to enter the strait, and then nothing else can come.
Well,
You
so
know,
from what I've seen, like some of the Iranian tank ships have been allowed to go into the blockade and go to an Iranian port.
right,
So there has been some allowance for that. It depends on the type of ship, and depends on how open is the captain of the ship in talking to the Navy to get permission to go in and drop anchor inside the Iranian waters.
Okay. Okay. So, okay. All right. Okay. Yeah. Okay. So, realistically, then, because we saw the Iranian foreign minister, he was in Pakistan at the weekend. The US didn't go. Donald Trump, unfortunately, there was that attempted incident in the press, the correspondence dinner on Saturday night, but that was apprehended, which is good because no one wants that. But he said that yesterday, I think, that he shifted his attention now to the Russia-Ukraine conflict, which, I mean, again, that's more politics at play, of course, because he's kind of saying, well, look, the blockade's doing its thing. That will run its course. The Iranians will come to us. There will be a, a, a joint
There
whatever.
will be a negotiation at some point. We'll come to an agreement and we'll carry on. But basically, the Trump statement about he's going to refocus on Ukraine and Russia um, is to me just more pandering to the world, saying we're just going to keep Iran in a economic chokehold until they submit.
Yeah.
And there's no need to keep biovading on Iran and all everything else because it's just it takes the oxygen out of the room and we're just going to let it sit there. We've got a blockade in place. We're enforcing the blockade. And so unless Iran decides to go kinetic and start shooting drones at
Okay.
bases and people, we're not going to do anything.
Yeah, okay. So let's talk about that because it's a subject that a lot of people are avoiding, understandably, is the potential return to military activity within the Gulf, within the Middle East Gulf, which, look, I don't want to talk about it either, trust me. But, if we're talking about this on our podcast around what it means for energy flows, that is, of course, a possibility, but regardless of what the percentage of that might be. If there is a return to military action, right? So let's say Israel start because their foreign minister last week was quite aggressive, saying that we will put them back into the Stone Ages, and I think that really gave flat price the catalyst it's got now. Um, if there is a return to military activity, and I'm trying to be quiet because my wife is here, she doesn't like talking about it. I totally get that. And Iran then start firing on the GCC again. People who are not involved in the war, they've not taken out any military activity. Where does that go? I mean, I'm not talking from a personal point of view here, what we do as a family, but in terms of like, if Israel and the US then fire on Iran again, and Iran fire back and start firing drones, and there's missile alerts in Bahrain and here and Kuwait, etc. What happens then? Because to me, that's game over.
Well, I can see Iran getting frustrated to the point where they do lash out at some point. Because what are you going to do if you can't pay your bill, you can't pay your goons on the streets, you can't pay yourself, you can't buy food, so you got to do something. So if you don't come to the table and try to do it diplomatically, then yeah, you're going to probably lash out at a last gasp effort to try to force a negotiation on your terms.
Yeah,
So I could see Iran doing something, you know, in that context of the tiger backed up into the corner. Um, and what you do at that point. And then
yeah,
what happens after? I mean, I think the real issue the U.S. military has at this moment in time is that they have a lot of air power in the region, a lot of missiles in the region, and they've got a lot of manpower in the region. But I honestly don't think that the current U.S. leadership wants to put bodies on the ground in Iran. They do not want to put troops on the ground because the worst thing that can happen, especially going into the midterm elections, is for body bags to start coming back from Iran to the United States.
yeah. And look, on that note, you mentioned this at the start of the conflict, and look what's been written. This is Michelle. She's great. I'm going to be in the States in three weeks, by the way. So hosting a session with Michelle. Um, this hasn't been published yet. So the War Powers Act of 1973, you mentioned this a while ago, 60 days unless Congress authorizes them. This is where we are. Look, um, it's the 60-day deadline is expected to hit in late April or early May. Now, 28th of February, I think, is when they started. I know that because that was my wedding anniversary, and we had to leave. So you're talking tomorrow is 60 days. No, 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 no.
No,
That'd be
it would be tomorrow.
would it? Because 28 days in February. So where would that be? 60 days. That would be so
Well,
the
it's
20.
30 days from the 28th. So that, and then 60 days from the 28th of February.
Right. Okay. So that would be tomorrow.
Yeah. Now, some people have said, well, it's not the 20, it's actually May 2nd is the 60-day window because the official notice to Congress that's required by the War Powers Act arrived on the Monday following the weekend attack.
Okay.
But nevertheless, it's coming to a point where politically that piece of legislation becomes, you know, in front, full face.
So okay. Look, when this is out, I'll send it to you. But you can see here, this is approval rating since 1990. Gas price, obviously, it's linear. So Trump's down here, not great. Obviously the 2008 financial crisis. Um, this is the gas price up here. Obviously, was this COVID coming out of COVID? Yeah, it would have
That
been.
looks like the Russian
Oh,
war.
no. Yeah, Russian war, yeah, 2022. You're right. You're right. So I'll send this to you later on. But just from a political, it, it, I mean, if they don't, if it carries on, which is obviously it's going to, it's not going to come to a head tomorrow. What happens then? Do they have to pull out, or do
Well,
they, or
there is in the War Powers Act resolution, the Congress has to authorize funding and because in the US Constitution, the power to wage war is vested with the Congress. The Congress is the entity within the US government branches that has the right to declare war, not the president, not the judiciary, it's the Congress. And it's the
right?
House of Representatives. So you have to have a vote on a war resolution to go into war. So the last time the House voted on a war resolution was World War II, where the president asked for a declaration of war against the Empire of Japan due to the attack on Pearl Harbor.
Okay.
And that vote was done, happened, and voila, we're at war. Uh, Post World War II, there's never been a formal declaration of war. It has been an authorization of using military units to meet foreign policy goals of the executive branch.
So hang on, there wasn't one.
There was never a declaration of war for Korea, Vietnam, Grenada, Panama,
So th
Libya,
so this
Serbia,
okay,
Iraq.
but this War Powers Act came in 1973. So
Right.
after Richard Nixon, I'd imagine, was that right?
It came in during that part of the administration because it was basically, so everybody understood that yes, the U.S. president is the commander in chief of the military, and he's got to be able to use the military to achieve policy goals set forth by his administration.
Okay.
You can't have, and you have to allow the president to respond to a surprise
So
if
hang on.
necessary.
So okay. So if Trump puts his vote to Congress and seeks this budget, 200 billion or whatever,
Well, he has to. There is no. So the War Powers Act says that after your initial notice, you have 60 days that you can pursue or be engaged in some type of war activity without a formal declaration of war. After that 60-day or getting up to that 60-day period, you must go, the president, the executive branch must go to the US Congress and ask for authorization to continue whatever you're doing for some period of time because there is a review and renewal. You just can't have an open-ended, oh, well, until we get this settled.
right. Okay. So it goes to Congress with the plan. If they vote yes, okay, the budget's approved,
Yep.
then the Congress is saying that they're declaring war.
No.
Okay.
So what typically happens is the Congress gives, okay, you can do the following activities. You can keep a blockade, but you can't use missiles. You can't put troops on the ground. So you're authorized to continue doing what you're doing within this framework. Now, yes, the Congress could say you authorized to use full military force. Here's the money. Come back to us in another 60 days. That could also happen.
Okay.
But if you look at the history of how the War Powers Act has been used and what the Congress has done, I believe like in Libya, Obama looked for an extension and was denied. I think in Serbia it was the same thing. Clinton was given an extra 30 days outside of the initial 60, and then after that he had to pull out the troops. Um, and I don't recall off the top of my head what happened with Iraq and the
Yeah.
use of the War Powers Act there, but obviously there was extensions and because it is a constant communication outside of a normal
Yeah, I mean,
war.
I suppose the Iraq one as well was highly emotional because after 9/11, right? So I just think people wanted retort, they wanted a response, didn't they? So I think that
Yeah.
politics kind of flowed. Whereas this is you know, when you're what 5.5, 6,000 miles away from where the problem is actually happening, the electorate is detached from that as well. So it's not as emotionally charged.
Well, sure they are, and you got to think here today in the current conflict with Iran, the U.S. population has a lot of insulation. I mean, yes, gasoline prices have gone up. Yes, they have. But they're still nowhere near what they are here in Europe. I mean, our gasoline prices here in Switzerland, we're over 2 francs a liter now.
Yeah, I mean, look, I mean, it's interesting that because obviously a lot of people ask me at the end of March because the way that UAE, I've laboured this point so many times, the way that UAE government regulate petrol prices, they set it at the end of each month for the whole month ahead, and it's fixed. And the methodology is based on where international markets are trading, where local markets are trading. It's no one really that sure on the methodology, apart from the government, which is fair enough. But based on history and what's happening, you might see petrol prices here drop in
Mhm.
April because gasoline prices are down, because gasoline margins are down. So I don't know. It's a bit messed up, isn't it? But look, anyway, we'll cover that probably next week because the petrol price will be out on Thursday night here. Um, okay, so look, going back to what I was saying about structure and that people are ignorant because the Strait of Hormuz is still closed. It to me, I think that the end is a lot closer than it was, right? And that is purely because how long economically can Iran sustain zero petrodollar income? And it's not long, is it? So that blockade then has worked. The problem is, as long as that happens, the rest of the world is choked off from 20% of the world's energy, and the bigger the problem gets. And I don't think people are quite aware of that. Like you can read now, oh look, King Charles and Queen Camilla are in the are in the US for a state visit, more than you're reading about what is actually happening in the war. So news value is diminished. But the same fucking issues are still there. There is no oil coming out of the Strait of Hormuz. It's still closed.
Well, I think news value has diminished, but I think also it's a case of the rhetoric you hear from Iran is roughly the same. That they have we have brought everybody to their knees and we're strong and we're resilient, and the same stuff from the United States. We destroyed their entire military. We've done this. We've done that. And so you're just reharpening the same points. I think the piece of information that is not getting enough coverage is the fact that we are heading to a massive energy crunch at some point.
Yeah,
We've been able to get by mainly because you've got large turnaround programs in Russia that are going to be kicking off here shortly, which have put downward pressure on crude. Almost 1.6 million barrels of crude runs will be cut for the month of May. You've got SPR releases, which have cushioned a lot of the market, and you had the release of sanctions relief on Russian oil that had been sitting on the water for more than 30 days. And
yeah.
so with all those combinations in there, it's kept a lid, but those patches are going to start to burst at some point because the market is just going to run out of those tools. Those tools are going to be stopped being functional.
Yeah.
Now, from a global standpoint, are we in a better place than we were in the 1970s when the last time we had a major energy crisis? I think we are because there is a lot more supply available in the world.
Yeah.
It's just the fact that getting it where it needs to be is going to cost a lot of money because freight rates are so strong.
Yeah. I mean, I keep on saying this, but I think I've said it the last 3 weeks. Do you feel like this is the week that we'll see something, or do you think the market is now like, if it happens, it happens. If it doesn't, then the world still it has got a massive problem. But I don't think. I think people are not trying to piece together the chessboard. They know what games each side is playing. Strait of Hormuz is closed because Iran are trying to choke it off. So the US said, "Fuck you, we'll blockade it as well." That means you can't get any oil out. And it's like who moves first. Now the
Oh,
US won't, like you
the
said.
U.S. hasn't blockaded Hormuz. U.S. has only blockaded Iranian ports.
Yes. Sorry. Yeah.
You
Yeah.
know, I
Yeah.
try to make sure that's a clear distinction because other ships are able to leave the area without a problem,
Yeah. Yeah.
as long as
Absolutely.
they don't get shot at by the Iranian IRGC. But nevertheless, I think you're at a point where, yeah, who blinks first, and who blinks first is going to be declared the loser, despite the fact that it's the world economy that's the big loser in all this.
Yeah. I'm just looking at just before we go, I'm just looking at Strait of Hormuz crossings. Let's have a look. Let me share this with you. Sorry, it's a bit slow. Right. Okay. I mean, it's not a lot, is it? So, I mean, obviously on the 18th, that was last weekend. We saw a big uptick. 17th, 18th, that was last Saturday, and then it was shut again. So, what have we seen? One yesterday, one tanker, ballast. Um, where is that going? Into the Middle East, the deep blue. So that's going from Fujairah into Hamria. But that's ballast. And then we've seen these three on the 20th. Was that on Saturday? Gone from Iran. So it's all Iranian. Seen one cargo go here, 1 million barrels on the Geelong, Zirku, which is port in the UAE, going to India. Let's have a look on everything. So there was one vessel yesterday. How many of it? So a total of 20. This weekend there were four vessels, tankers. Let me just refresh this. Um, what else did we see? What's this cargo? Steel, iron ore, grains. So Iraq into Oman, that's coming out. Um, I mean, it's not a lot, but this is what you can see. So that's container vessels are not in there. Um, Passenger ships not in there, but it's largely the same. Nothing's really changed. But like I said, I think what has changed this week has been the longer that it goes on, the more that Iran choked off, and the more they might come around the table. I understand that he's the Iranian foreign minister is back in Pakistan today, and they proposed something overnight, but haven't heard anything from the US.
Well, the foreign minister actually is now in Moscow.
Or is he?
Yeah, so he went from Pakistan to Oman, Oman to Pakistan, Pakistan to Moscow. So whatever he's trying to push to do, I mean, the one thing is that Russia has said that they would take the Iranian uranium, enriched uranium, off their hands if there's a deal. So maybe we're seeing the makings of something, but again, it's hard to really understand what's going on because there's no information, and a lot of that I think is warranted because you don't want to throw stuff out and have misrepresentation as to what's being discussed, and then you have a bunch of ships try to make a break for the exit and they get shot at again.
Yeah, exactly. It's got to be clear. There's got to be clear modus operandi on how it all works, insurance coverage, everything, and that's not going to happen overnight. But I think the minute that there is some kind of more concrete news around a framework agreement for peace, then I think the War Risk Committee, in the Lloyd's of London floor insurance get together and say, okay, now you can proceed. Then I think everyone goes through. But
Yeah.
I don't know whether we're days or weeks away from that. I don't know. Just before we go, 108.23 up $2.90 June Brent, where we were when we started. So we're not moving the market yet, mate.
Nope, not at all. Well, thank you for tuning in. Lick. Click,
Nearly.
like, comment, and subscribe. You can
Yeah.
lick if you have one of those types of computers where it goes off your saliva. But hey, other than that, we look forward to speaking to you all again and stay safe.
Ciao.